Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We are in Numbers chapter 31 today, and we're going to try to do this chapter in 5 minutes. If you happen to have the attention span of a hamster, I recently started doing these chapter studies in 1 minute on Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts. So, if if that's your situation, those are available. Although I really would encourage you to do the 5 minute studies and studies even longer than 5 minutes. I use those more as a marketing tool, but they are out there if you're interested in watching them. They have, some more fancy graphics typically and things like that. So that's Instagram and YouTube. But don't run off too soon. Let's talk about Numbers chapter 31 in 5 minutes. Our main characters for this chapter are going to be the Midianites. We've talked about them a little bit in the past before. The Midianites were idolatrous people who had encouraged the Israelites to worship false gods. And in Numbers chapter 25, God actually sent a plague on Israel because they allowed the Midianites to lead their hearts away from him. You may remember that. Moses is also going to be featured in this chapter. Eleazar, who is Aaron's son, he became the high priest after Aaron died. And then Phinehas. Phinehas was Eleazar's brother, and he was Eleazar was Phinehas was Eleazar's son and Aaron's grandson. These events occurred shortly before the Israelites went into the land of Canaan, so this would be approximately 1450 BC. And the camp of Israel really hasn't moved a whole lot yet. We are still camped northeast of Pisgah on the plains of Moab. So somewhere there on the map between Pisgah and the Jordan River. So now as we look at our outline, this chapter has 54 verses, but I put it all under one section. It's all about God's judgment on the Midianites. So as a punishment for intentionally leading the Israelites into idolatry in Numbers chapter 25, God told Moses to make war on the Midianites and to destroy them. So 1,000 soldiers were selected from each of Israel's 12 tribes. They went to war with Midian and they defeated them. They killed their kings, all the male citizens, and we're also told that Balaam, the diviner, who we talked about in chapters 22 through 24, I believe, he was killed, and this was a punishment because we're told that he was the one who devised the plan to lead Israel into idolatry. All of the women, the children, and the animals were taken captive before the towns were burned. The Israelites brought the captives to Moses and Eleazar, but Moses was really angry at the officers who had spared many of the women who had actually played a key part in seducing the Israelite men into idolatry. Moses told the officers to kill all of the captives except for the virgin Midian women because they hadn't played a part in that. The soldiers were then told to remain outside the camp for 7 days and to perform the 7 days of cleansing that was required for any Israelite who came into contact with a dead body. All the spoils of war were also required to go through a cleansing process. The spoils were then divided, with half of them given to the warriors who had done the fighting, and then the other half given to the congregation of Israel. A percentage of the plunder was given to Eleazar the priest as a contribution to the Lord, and then another portion was given to the Levites who worked at the tabernacle. The total plunder and persons amounted to 675,000 sheep. That is a ton of sheep. 72,000 cattle, 61,000 donkeys, and 32,000 virgin women. Eleazar the priest received 675 sheep, 72 cattle, 61 donkeys, and 32 young women. The Levites received one of every 50 animals and persons given to the congregation of Israel. We're told that the Israelites didn't suffer any casualties in the battle against the Midianites. The warriors then brought an offering of the gold that they had plundered during their battles, and they brought it to the priests as an offering to God, and it totaled 16,750 shekels, which is approximately 235 kilograms or 518 pounds. So that is Numbers chapter 31. Now for our application, it's a little bit heavier today. I think I'm just going to read it to be as concise as possible because there's a lot here. Many people use this chapter and chapters like it to try to accuse God of being morally corrupt because we see here that children were killed. And as we read this, it draws an emotional response from us, and I think that's natural. But a lot of people say, well, this is morally objectionable that God would kill children. But let's lay our emotions aside for a little bit and try to view this from just a rational standpoint. I think if we do that, just from a purely rational viewpoint, there isn't anything in the story that shows God to be immoral. And let me explain that a little bit further. We need to remember that God is the life giver and that he also retains the right to take life if he wants to. He doesn't owe life to any of us. He's not required by any law or by any moral foundation to keep you alive or me alive for another day. We as humans don't have the right to take life. So it's easy to feel like the taking of life is always morally wrong, but remember, we and God are not in the same position. Furthermore, if God saves the innocent and takes them to heaven, which the Bible suggests that he does, then the Midianite children were taken out of an immoral world and they got to live in a much more desirable place with God. There would have been some pain associated with that process, and many people say, well, causing somebody pain is morally evil. But I think if we look at our own lives, our own practices, we'll realize that causing somebody else pain is not always morally wicked. For example, consider our practice of poking babies with needles to give them medicine that we believe is necessary and beneficial to their long-term good. We wouldn't say that we are morally evil by taking our child to the doctor and having that done. In fact, we would say that we are loving because that works out to their benefit in the long term. There's obviously a much bigger discussion around this that we need to have that can be fit into a 5-minute Bible study, but in light of these points, we should be careful before we accuse God of moral evil just because his actions are somewhat objectionable to us on the surface.